Alrighty, welcome Year 11 History. So as promised, I am making a video for you to help you come up with a question. And remember, when you are starting to play around with making a question, I would like you to send that through to me and chat with me about that so we can make sure you're on track. But I've got a very special guest today. Mr. Files is here to give us some top tips on developing a individual history essay question. Welcome, Mr. Files.
Thank you, Mr. Oxon. Good to be here.
Excellent. So what are your top tips for creating an individual history essay question?
Okay, so first thing that you need to do is obviously work out a period in history that you're really interested to know some more about. So that's the first point. Make sure you go there. Don't go any further back than 1500 because we're doing modern history. So no further back than 1500, anything from there. And don't try and bite off too much. You just want a small period of history. Don't try and do too much. There are probably two types of questions that you can do. One question will be a yes or no question. So to what extent was Harry Truman right to use atomic bombs in World War II? Yes, no. The other type of question is a ranking question where you might ask who was the greatest Australian of the 20th century, and it might be Sir Donald Bradman is first. But hey, don't ignore somebody like Edith Cowan, and don't ignore someone like Howard Florey. So each gets their own paragraph. So really that's the two ways you can go about doing this. You can go a yes, no, where you agree or disagree, and you can go with a ranking one. That's pretty important. Something else to consider as well is you need to ask a question that doesn't just let you waffle on information as if you're the history textbook. So don't ask a question where you're just telling the information. Make sure it actually is an answer to a question. So with the Harry Truman one, to what extent was Harry Truman right to use atomic weapons in World War II? You're not talking about the bombing, you're talking about whether he's right or wrong. So just be careful around that. The other one as well, Stu, I reckon that's really important. Have a think about looking at a movie. Lots of movies have been made which pretend or don't pretend to be historically accurate. They are generally the basis of good questions. So to what extent is the movie Titanic historically accurate when compared to the real event? And that gives you quite a lot of scope. And don't go outside. You pick the one movie. So Enemy at the Gates is a great movie about the Battle of Stalingrad. So to what extent is Enemy at the Gates even an accurate depiction of the Battle of Stalingrad? And even if the movie doesn't pretend to, if it doesn't sell itself as being accurate, that's okay. You're just looking at it through a historical lens. So the movie Pearl Harbor is a perfect example because the Battle of Pearl Harbor is depicted quite accurately in the movie, but the rest of the movie is pathetic. Like
exactly right.
You know, like the Doolittle raids is being executed by the men that fought at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's right. And there are like lots and lots of films. Any of you guys that are also in my media studies class, any sort of films that surround a historical time, you can pick this, okay? So if you are stuck, that's something to go for.
The only other thing I'd say is make it measurable. So nothing in history is 100% absolute, just like, the Sith views things as absolutes. In Star Wars, shouldn't do that.
Should be a Jedi. Be a Jedi.
It's got to be grey. It's not just black and white. So have a measuring word in your question. To what extent is President Harry Truman correct to use atomic weapons in World War II? Because then you can say to a high extent, to a low extent. You can't make it absolute. So you've got to have at least one paragraph that is counter-argument. So from the other point of view, for a Year 11 essay, I guess you're looking at 4 paragraphs, I reckon. And if you do 3 that agree and 1 that disagrees, or the other way around, you can do 2-2. But it's dangerous because sometimes if you're 2-2, you're not answering the question. You're sitting on the fence. Skillful essay writers can do 2 and 2. But if you're concerned about not creating an argument, it's really got to be 3 and 1.
Yeah, that's right. And so with your research that you've got, you might find that you've got 8 different things that are great. It's your job to sort of decide which 4 you're going to include there and which ones are going to help you answer that question the best. Now, I think from here, what we're going to do is we're going to say thank you to Mr. Files.
Thanks very much, and good luck and enjoy.
And then we are going to skip over to some examples, and I will see you there in a second. Alrighty, so thank you to Mr. Files for helping us with that. We're going to have a look at a couple of examples now. I've got 2 examples. These are Year 10 examples, so they're not at the standard of Year 11, but they are a high standard for Year 10. Okay, so who is the greatest Australian of the 20th century? Okay, now this one goes in with an introduction. Okay, and then in each paragraph, they discuss a different person. Okay, So in the first one, we've got Edith Cowan, and then they talk about Howard Florey, and then lastly about Donald Bradman, okay? And in the end, they decide that Sir Donald Bradman is deserving of the title, okay? This conclusion is a little small. Yours would like to be much larger, and also because it's year 10, it is only 800 words. So they are ranking and looking at the top 3, and then picking the one that they think is the greatest Australian of the 20th century. Now, 20th century is pretty broad. That's 100 years. With yours, you're going to want to be a bit tighter on that, depending on your question. But usually, you want to be specific about the time period. All right. Now, the other example I have is one that is comparative between two. So George Washington is to a high extent a better president than Abraham Lincoln. Now, this is a clunky question, okay? However, they break it down pretty simply. Introduction, 2 paragraphs, or 3 paragraphs, sorry, and a conclusion. So they have 2 paragraphs that are for George Washington, okay? And then this first one is about why Abraham Lincoln was a better president. Second and then third ones are about why George Washington was a better president. These are quite good. However, really what I want you to get out of having a look at these, okay, and I'll post both of these onto Daymap and to Teams, all right? They are different ways you can structure your essay. Now, keep in mind that you've got 1,500 words to play with. So this is almost twice as much as this. So if you are doing a comparative and you're comparing something, all right, looking at the both sides of the argument, you might have 2 paragraphs on one or 3 paragraphs on one on the other, or 2 on each. But remember, if you've got 2 on each, it might be a bit even, okay? And then if you are ranking, okay, you're looking at probably putting the one that you think is the most important as your last paragraph before your conclusion, okay? So they're the 2 essay structure types. I'm going to put these 2 up onto Daymap and to Teams, and you guys can have a look there. What I would like you to do this week is start thinking about what sort of question you're going to create, and then contact me with what you think, okay? What you think you would like to do. And we can try and workshop a question, all right? So keep in mind the top tips that Mr. Files has given you, okay? And we'll go from there. Thank you very much, guys.